In a land called England, there was an Italian girl who vouched that she would never start 12 books contemporary again. She would never start to read 12 books at the same time. And 3 months after, in July 2024, two things happened. The first one is that she finally finished the 12th book on the list that she had started 3 months prior. And the second thing is that as soon as she finished that 12th book, she went through her shelves and started 19 books at the same time. Welcome everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Inked Reader. My name is Eva and I am unhinged. I finally finished the 12th book I'd started 3 months ago, and I told myself never again, and then I just became so excited because I'm having a couple of days off and there was sunshine outside, and I was just like, I'm gonna start them all. I'm gonna just go through my TBR and pick everything that I need to read because it's maybe fairy loots, something I try to kind of keep up with my subscription boxes, or just I wanted to read them, and I just did. And so I actually started 19 to 20 books yesterday, and so I don't know where I'm gonna finish them. But actually, you know what, I love starting a bunch of books and then reading different things every day. It keeps my interest going. At times it's stressful, but it's been working. Long story short though, I'm gonna wrap up July today with you. Let me know if you would be interested in my currently readings, because I never do TBRs anymore, but I can definitely do current reads when I start like a bunch of books, like 19 books, if you're interested, but let me know. But for today, we wrap up July. July was being a mediocre reading month overall. However, I'm so excited about all the rest of the books I've just started, but I would say that probably the highest rated books is either 3.5 or 4 stars max, so not the best reading month. However, I did go through a couple of books that have been on my TBR for a long time, and I did listen to a couple of interesting audiobook overall. So although nothing super exciting, there's nothing that's gonna end up in my favorite of the year today, I do have a couple of interesting things to talk about with you today, and as always I'm gonna go from the least enjoyable read to the most enjoyable read. Take with a pinch of salt, because this month I was like, yeah, I didn't really love anything, but I tried to make a list anyway. So let's start on number 8, and I'll start with It Didn't Start With You. This is How Inherited Family Trauma Shapes Who We Are and How to End the Cycle. This is a non-fiction psychological book. So I initially became interested in this because it was mentioning epigenetic. Epigenetic is this branch of science and psychology that looks at how trauma experienced by our ancestors might kind of stay within our genes, so impact our genes. I'm by no means an expert, but it will basically, trauma will be carried on intergenerationally. So for example, there were, I think, a few studies where they looked at how people that experienced World War II, the Holocaust, and how their descendants, children and grandchildren who had not direct experience of the war, they still had higher than average incidence of mental health issues. So I believe this was all about epigenetic. Instead, this book is this family therapist who looks at his own practice and makes the links between his patient mental health presentations and links it with generational trauma. So, someone might be pulling their hair out because their parent had this bad experience, and so they guided their client to explore that with their parent, and they got to the bottom of it, and then they fixed the client. And the epigenetic in these, the studies in these are just mentioned on the beginning of the story, at the beginning of the story, but they are by no means explored much. The main bulk of this story, as I said, of this book, it's actually, the experience of the author with its own clients. And this could go both ways. This man could be a pioneer of intergenerational trauma. He might have found, the cause and potentially the cure of that, or this might be just Fox psychology, where you can't really take your own personal experience and make it into, oh, this is how it is. I'm not saying that everything it says in this is not backed up by science, but if it is, it doesn't show us, not to extent that I would love to. And I have not studied the amount of of years I did psychology, and which focused so much on research, empirical research, to just take a book like this to its face value. And he puts inside here like prompts and things you can ask yourself, just to kind of cure yourself and just to forgive and move on. And I just found that probably, I just don't know, it wasn't the book for me. And I don't think that when I read a book like psychology or science, I do like the science to be there. It does make me feel like I want to explore more epigenetic and understand more of it, and so I will reach out for other books by the topic. But definitely, if you're interested in epigenetic, this is not the book for you. I would say that all the claims he makes, to take them as of now with a pinch of salt, because there is no actual research on the basics of it. And so this book overall, it didn't help much, to be fair. I didn't take away anything from it apart from, yeah, I should explore epigenetic, actually explore it with a, you know, backup of scientific research behind it. So no, I wouldn't suggest this. Moving on to book number 7, which is a book that I thought I was gonna put last for a very long time until I finally finished. It didn't start with you because, yeah. Number 7, I would have to put Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. This is a high fantasy, if you kind say that. It's a fantasy series by Armentrout. She usually is known to write YA, and I enjoyed a lot of her YA series. I enjoyed the first book in the series quite a lot, and in the first book you follow this sort of nun. She is the maiden. She is protected and covered from everyone in this kingdom who lives behind walls to protect themselves against the cravens. The cravens are sort of zombie vampire creatures that will eat you and consume your blood if you get out in the wild. So people are living behind walls, and she is particularly protected. She is this kind of almost like sacred figure that is waiting to ascend. We don't really know what it is at the first book, and she is then living this very sheltered life, and she is kind of sick of it, and she wants to make a difference. And then she's assigned a new guard, Hawk, and he opens up new doors for her. If you want, she starts to become, you know, more of a woman, to explore herself and her role in this world, and what it means for her to be a maiden, what's behind the whole thing, why does she needs to be the maiden and so protected and so on. The premise of, you know, having kind of semi-erotica fantasy, there are sex scenes in this series, explicit ones, that in the first one, you know, you kind of have a nun figure going through that. It was juicy at times, and I always said that the strongest part of these is the romance, and I think she does sex scenes or just romantic tension quite well, which is true for this book. However, said that, take the first 400 pages of this book, rip them out and set them on fire. Just keep them for winter to keep you warm. They are useless. Like, I refuse to acknowledge 3/4 of this book. 3/4 of this book was shit. She goes back into like very YA tropey, annoying, useless writing style, which I never noticed in other books by her. I was never bothered by her writing as I was in, you know, 400 pages of these. Nothing happens. Like, what the fuck? Like, nothing happens. Literally nothing. I don't also like traveling books, and it takes the whole 500 and something pages for them to go to point A to point B. And in the between, there's not like there is action or there's like a lot of happening. There's fucking nothing in between. They don't even travel to many different places. They literally have to A to B, and there is like the inner monologue of Poppy, which she's an annoying brat, and I will justify it to the sense of, you know, she's been sheltered, she doesn't know much about the world, but everything that her inner monologue is quite tedious. It's just quite, very childish, to the point of, I get it, because she's kind of, you know, she's not used to the world, but I also don't care about reading her, about exploring it in so many details that are pointless. And it's nothing. There is nothing in between. It's not like they go A and then they go to the mountains and then they go this. No. They just literally have to go a couple of places, and it just takes fucking ages to do so. And nothing. The plot picks up toward the end, but because it was so lackluster throughout the first 400 pages, I just couldn't care less. Now, let me know if book number 3 is the one that everybody's complaining about, or this is the one that everybody complained about. I know that at some point people dropped the series because they were like, nothing happens, it's so slow, it's boring. It is so boring. Let me know if it was that one or it's the third one. I do have already the third one, so I might try the third one, but listen, honestly, I pulled myself through, I pushed myself through all of these just because, one, I purchased it and I don't like to waste money without even giving it a try, and two, because I just couldn't believe what I was reading. I was like, this at some point has to pick up, and it does a bit toward the end, but I don't know what I'm gonna do with the rest of the series. I would really appreciate your suggestion or any advice, or have you read on? Does it get any better? Because these, honestly, you could use this to torture someone. The first 400 pages, if it could be used as a torture device for someone to get them through those. Okay, so actually I had put initially another book as number 7 and I put this as number 6, but naturally, when I was filming this, I picked up this as number 7 and not the other book. So to me, it means that probably when I initially sat down and put this list down, this had to be at number 7, just because I had a genuine reaction against it. I was generally pushing myself through it. And number 6, I wasn't pushing myself through it. First of all, I listened to this on audiobook, but also overall, I didn't have that much of a negative reaction to it. I just had a more of like a neutral reaction to it. So I did listen to The Laws of the Sky. It's a horror story and it's not too long. I think the audiobook was around like 4 hours. Listen to a 1.2 speed or 1.5, which usually is the speed I listen to audiobooks. So The Laws of the Sky is about this bunch of elementary school kids. They're around 6 years old, if I'm not mistaken, that they go on a trip with their class in the woods. They're just doing a camping trip, and there are a couple of parents and a teacher accompanying them on this trip. They're supposed to be out just for a weekend or for a couple of days. And when they are in the woods, one of the kids turns serial killer, and they start to die off very quickly. Now, this is the premise of the book. It's not like a spoiler or anything. You know from the beginning, it tells you at the very beginning what's gonna happen, and then you kind of see this playing out, which is probably why eventually I didn't end up loving these. It's not my style of horror. I don't like being told at the very beginning of a story what's gonna happen and then just seeing it playing out. It doesn't hold suspense for me, which is very important in my novels. I hate, or like I really don't appreciate when I know at the beginning how it's gonna play out. It rarely worked. It might work, but it's not very often. So for me, when you take away the fact that I already knew what was gonna happen, I just needed to see how. Yeah, okay. It's like the same problem I have with, Battle Royale or the Hunger Games. I know how it's gonna play out, and I don't care that much about finding out the how. Anyway, I enjoyed the writing. I liked the introspection we get in the characters. Albeit it's a short one, we do get a bit of it, like the inner monologue. That was quite interesting, and it's definitely gross, especially like it's body horror, I would say. So it does get quite gross at times. Nothing that scandalized me, to be fair. Maybe there's something wrong with me because I wasn't so scandalized about these, but yeah, I didn't find this a particularly disturbing horror, although I've heard that for many people it is. But couple of things. First of all, there is the Law of the Sky, which the title is taken from. So it's this kind of story that's told around a sort of campfire to the kids, and I really love that story. But I didn't associate then the story, which is so prominent since it's it's the title, with anything that actually happens after. Like, I didn't make a connection between the title, the fact that this story was told toward the beginning, and then what the events that play out. I was like, what's the point of that very cool story, to the point that you gave the book the title of that legend? But then maybe it's me being stupid, I didn't interconnect the dots, or maybe they're not there. And so I found that quite disappointing, because I was looking for that to kind of play out the legend, to have a morale or something in this story, which it didn't have. So overall, I don't think this had like such a big impact on me. Maybe I won't remember much about it. I didn't think about it once I stopped listening to it, basically. But we will see how it withstand the test of time. Okay, and then at number 5, it's the first one of 2 audiobooks I've listened to, and I kind of delved a bit more, if you want to just listen to a couple of those, but I delved a bit more into sci-fi horror. I thought that sci-fi is a kind of new genre for me. It's something that I've not explored much, and because I love horror so much, combining the two would be the best chance for me to actually enjoying a sci-fi with a big element of horror. So I did listen to The Luminous Dead, and this is by the same author that wrote my first Illumicrate, which is Last to Leave the Room. This came with Illumicrate Evernight subscription a few months back, and because I was quite intrigued by that story, although I didn't love it, I was like, let me get, you know, another book by the author, let me see how I found it. And this is a story about Gia, I think it's called Gia. Sorry, I'm terrible with names, but Gia, she is someone who explores these caves in this unknown planet. We probably know that it's an alien planet, it's not Earth, and there is like this system of caves that people can explore in order for resources. There are also like these cavers, sort of creature, deadly creatures that roam around it, so it's quite dangerous. So Gia has to go on a mission in these caves, and all of the time she has been kind of fitted with a suit that's made to keep her alive. It's connected to her intestines, it gives her food and air. And because I believe it's quite dark in the caves, there's no light or oxygen, I believe. And you have M. M is the leader of this expedition. She is gonna be constantly with Gia through intercom, so they're gonna talk, or video link, something of the sort. So Gia is the worker, but M is the mind behind, and the role of M is to guide Gia through these tunnels. And soon you start realizing that M has other purposes for sending Gia down there on these expeditions. Now, I noticed a couple of similarities, a lot of similarities actually, between this book and the other book by the author. And the main thing is that you kind of got these odd, authoritative characters that are potentially antagonists or helpers or our main protagonists. There is a character like that in this book here, and there was the character of M was very similar to that character. Also, like our main protagonist developed like a weird dynamic with M, as there was a weird dynamic in the other book. So I noticed a bit of similarities to that. I also noticed that she writes books where the horror element is just in the tension that she tries to keep, but there is no much meat behind it. And this is literally an exploration of caves, and there is a bit, tiny bit of action in the end, but it's mostly psychological torture, if you want, which is not necessarily, it's something that I can read sometimes, but has become something that I'm kind of getting bored of, because it's so done, it's so much done, especially in sci-fi horror I've read thus far. So overall, I enjoyed the writing. I listened to this on audiobook, and as the other book by her I read, it flows by very quickly. Like, she's got a very easy writing style. I liked how her characters are very much unlikable. You're not there to like anybody. They make very questionable choices, and it's more about the dynamics between the kind of antagonist helper and your main protagonist. So I liked those aspects, but I wish that she had done more with the horror plot of it. I found the ending quite meh, that was it. Even when we get to the action, it was very quick and not very satisfactory. So overall, a book that remained like in the 3 stars. Meh, okay, it was okay. I will give the author another try, but I really hope she mixes up her ingredients and makes something new, and it's not the same recipe over and over again, because otherwise I might not continue on following this author. No major critique, but it's a very atmospheric, not much happens horror, which is probably something that if you're looking for something more exciting, more full of action and monsters or things, or just actual horror, this is probably not for you. I would even struggle to categorize this as horror. I think it's like mild horror. And now number 4, technically is like not really a full book, but I'm talking about, I finished Oathbringer Part 1 by Brandon Sanderson. And this is something that UK has done, the publishing in UK has done, I don't know if in other countries, but it has divided Oathbringer into 2 parts, as he has for all the other books in the series. And it has been also a pattern where I found the first half, because this is just the first half of the story, quite dragging. Still okay, I really like these characters, but quite uneventful, and so there's not much excitement going on for me, and I gave this 4 stars probably. It was okay, nothing to complain about, but really nothing much happens in these. And usually the second part kicks ass, so that's what I'm waiting for. I've already started part number 2, but I don't think it would be fair to really talk too much about these or to just go into a lot of details, because I think, you know, I need to experience the story in its fullest, which is what it's meant to do. I don't know, I think they did us disservice. UK, England, you've done a disservice to Mr. Sanderson, I believe, in splitting the books into parts. You might have benefited his pockets or your pockets, but not us as readers, because I've noticed this thing where the first part is just meh and the second part is way more exciting usually, which is meant to come together. It's meant to be one whole book, and not many, but there are gonna be some readers that are gonna pick up one part, maybe feel like, okay, that's not probably for me, and leave it and never continue on to the actual good part. So for the love of everything that's sweet and delicious, just keep them together. You know, they did it with Way of Kings. I was so happy to find like the whole book. That's how you do it. Was it Gollands? I don't know. Who's he publishing these? It doesn't even say. Gollands. Why? And number 3, we have the actual 12th book that I had started 3 months ago. This is the book that took me the longest to read, and it's probably the longest book I'm gonna read this year, not considering Oathbringer. I don't know how it's the total of pages, maybe it's similar, but this felt like a task. And I have read Shogun. I did it in 3 months. I managed to read this 1,125 pages novel, and I wanted to read this because I heard only brilliant, amazing reviews for the TV show, and I wanted to read these before actually going to the show. I enjoy historical fiction, so I told myself, why not reading it? And then right through the post, I looked at these, I looked at the amount of pages and say, that's why not. But I did it anyway. I think the Blur lied to us a bit, in the sense that the Blur says this is the story of John Blackthorne, who is this Englishman who shipwrecks with his crew on the coast of Japan. And he then kind of witnessed the political events of that period in Japan. And I think that's definitely part of the story, but it's more about Japan at the beginning of the 17th century, the big political shifts that happen and how that changes the whole country. So it's very much about the inner politics of Japan, more than actually Blackthorne, which I didn't mind at all. But this book, reading this was a task, and it was both dreadfully dragging at times and fascinating, and unfortunately it wasn't in equal measure. The dragging and boredom took probably the most of my experience with these, but I think somehow it was balanced ultimately, because I didn't end up DNFing these, or I didn't end up like hating these. I gave it a 3 stars, and I stand by that rating, because I do believe that, you know, a lot of things didn't work out for me, but I do have some respect for this book and what it's trying to achieve. I think, first of all, this is a political historical novel, which is something I never experienced before. It was my first time experiencing a highly political historical fiction to this extent, and I don't know if it's my thing. It might be, it might not be. I'll figure it out. But this book focuses a lot on the machinations and on what happens in the background of some main events in Japan in the period of the time that we are following. And I think that's the key part. Like, we are following the background machinations that lead to these events that are then not necessarily shown. Actually, the title doesn't happen in this book. The book stops before these. I don't want to give any spoilers, but if you know history, like you basically follow the whole, you know, this is how we come to that big war, but the war is not shown. The battle is never shown, the final battle. And I do have some high hopes for the TV show to make up for what this lacks, because I don't think that showing just the background and never the main event serves any novel well. And I think that's also true for this. I love when the novel shows both. So in that sense of actually showing some main events rather than just mentioning it, so much things have led to this, so many small moments have led to this, and then you don't show us. Even Yabu and stuff like that, they're not shown. And I was like, oh, like, but that's something that frustrates me quite a lot. However, because this author takes painstakingly long time to describe scenes, like, maybe, you know, they're taking tea and it takes like 20 pages of just serving the tea and having a conversation around the tea pot. Because of that, I feel like I've learned so much about Japan in that period of time. If anything that's in here, it's actually true. And I want to believe that the author who had some experience of Japan did this research, and that there is a lot of truth both behind, you know, the traditions and stuff that are shown in here and the main historical events, but I can't testify to that because I am unfortunately quite ignorant about them. And so I feel like I've learned a lot. I feel like because just of, you know, the amount of time I spent with these characters, ultimately I did cherish a few of them. Or cherish is the wrong word, I never grew attached to any of them really, but I respected some of them. Blackthorn is not one of them though. I really disliked the guy. I found him pompous and stupid at times and useless, but at the same time, while I was a bit like hesitant going to this, I was like, is it gonna be like the savior fixing the days? He isn't in this novel. The guy is very much inconsequential in a lot of his things. Yes, it does have some key moments here and there, but the guy is there to witness the events when he does, but the story is not about him saving the day. It's not about him at all in a certain sense, and he is just a witness. It's just there at times, and I appreciated that. I appreciated how, you know, the mastercraft and the actual the genius, the minds are all about local people, local nobles and people related to them who actually moved the story forward. And so how, you know, the focus is very much on them, I believe, as much as is on him. So ultimately I found myself finishing this, and I found myself putting in the cart Taipei, which is the next book in the series, which I believe takes place a couple of hundreds years after this. So it's actually 19th century. I don't know, so I will eventually read on. I've heard that the Taipei is better than this, better written. His writing is nothing that particularly caught my attention or anything, but it is a unique novel and I can't deny that, and I'm so excited about looking at, you know, having seeing the show, because I believe they might do a better job than these, while at the same time I really want to pay respect to these. Also, one thing I want to kind of just say, because it really stuck me on my throat a bit. I've read so many reviews bashing this just because they, oh, it's so full of racism, and I was just like, that's a fucking dumb comment to make. It's about 17th century Japan. We're talking about 17th century Japan. You know historically what it means, and of course the English were racists or used a lot of racist blurs, you know, and names for the Japanese people, and Japanese used a lot for the English or like white people. It goes both sides because that's 17th century for you. And I was just like, this is acknowledged in the story, by the way. It's like, it comes from both ways. You stink because you don't wash English, and you are a barbarian, and the barbarian call the Japanese monkey, and clearly they are so advanced, which has been absolutely amazing how advanced the Japanese people were back then compared to the English people in so many things. And I think I really liked how he addresses in here, but I also think that's such a stupid comment to make for historical fiction. You are reading a historical fiction, it has to be realistic, and it's also written in 1975. It was published in 1975. So I don't know, it baffles me people that read historical fiction and don't think that they're going to be problematic stuff inside. Then don't read historical fiction, because that's history for you, and it's not nice how people referred or how people suppressed or what people did to each other. We know this. If you study any history, you know this. But on that note, I really loved how actually the author portrayed a Japan that was so advanced, like these people that had so much grace, so much savagery at the same time, but so more advanced and graceful, and how their way of living, it was just shown to us, and it was up to us to decide how we want to see it. But I found so many moments where, you know, the Japanese were portrayed as these very elegant, clever people, and I really appreciated that part. I think, like, you know, the reason why I kept reading 4,000 pages is because I was truly fascinated by the world they lived in. Yes, they didn't give a fuck about life of the common people. Life was worth nothing, but to be fair, I don't think in England in the 17th century life was worth much more. So yeah, moving on, but it's been a ride reading Shogun. Okay, and then I have read Dead Silence. Dead Silence is the other sci-fi horror. I actually listened to this before. I listened to The Luminous Dead, and definitely worked better for me. I've heard great things about this author, or at least, you know, people say, you know, picking up her book quite often recently. So I found this on Script, or Everard, that's called now, and I decided to give it a try. And this is about this small crew who is on their way back to Earth, and you have, or Earth, or whether it's all of the planet that they stand for or they work for, and on their way back they intercept a signal, a distress signal, and so they decided to that by law they need to respond to the distress signal. So they go and they found this ship, this spaceship, which is kind of a cruise spaceship that was abandoned, that was given for lost decades prior, and no one knew what happened to it. It disappeared into space. They finally found it, and now they need to go on board and find out why it's giving us, you know, what happened to it, where it's the distress signal coming from, and so on. It's difficult not to give spoilers for these, but to me this screamed a bit. I initially was very excited about this, because to me, you know, the fact that it was this fancy cruise in space for humans to go on, it was like advertised as such a luxurious experience in space, a cruise, to me screamed Titanic. Like, I know that they were in space, but in my mind they were at the bottom of the ocean exploring the Titanic. And because I've seen videos, I'm obsessed with the Titanic, I could really picture the events in my mind, and it worked quite well, because I thought that for the majority of this novel, at least the first half, it was quite unsettling and very atmospheric, definitely more horror-ish than the Luminous Dead. More horror-ish again in its depiction of spaces, environments, and what they found. Like, it's another one, without giving any spoilers, that it's all in the atmosphere that's created. We have unlikable, unreliable clients, main protagonists, who are, I think our main protagonist especially, she's in a sense a bit heavy-handed. You get from the start where she's at, and so there's never any doubt that what she's telling us, it might not be true. It's really not a spoiler, you know, from the very beginning that she's a bit, yeah, she's having a tough time. I did find the ending, I knew what was happening, like, basically, because I got the vibe toward the halfway through. It was like, really nothing is happening. I don't think it's gonna be the kind of horror that you are used to. I think it's just, you know, it's a psychological horror more than anything else. And despite that, I did have a good time listening to the rest of it. I do think it's a bit too long for the amount of plot that's in it, but I did enjoy the ending. Yeah, a bit of an action toward the end. I will try more stuff by her. I'm just a bit afraid that they kind of use the same recipe over and over again, and it's going to be turn out the same things. What I would like for authors to really do something different with their stories. but that's just my biases, maybe because I've read The Luminous Dead and I found a lot of similarities between the two books. So I'm just like, is it gonna be the same me going in another book by the author because it's another sci-fi horror? I know that she has it out, another sci-fi horror. Is it gonna be the same recipe, just with different characters and slightly different? But let me know if you've read anything else by the author. This was overall the most successful read, full-length novel of the month, and I gave it like 3.75, 4 stars. I had a good time, and I think part of it was generally thinking about I'm on the Titanic at the bottom of the ocean, though. I think that really, me picturing that in my mind really put me in the right mood to find this so creepy. And number one is probably the only time you're gonna have an occasion like this happening on my channel, because it's a short novel actually, and it's actually a horror short novel. And I read this on Kindle on my way to my placement, and it's Sour Candy. Sour Candy is a short novel about this man who is in a shop, is buying some supplies for his lover, and one is on an aisle of a supermarket. He sees this woman with this little kid, and the woman is clearly out of it, and the kid is pretty insistent that he wants something, and the kid is shouting and screaming, and the whole attention of the whole shop is kind of tailored toward them because it's a weird scene. And things spiral down from there. Because it's a short novel, I really don't want to spoil anything, but I must say that for less than 100 pages, this man made me think about, if this was to happen, it would made me go batshit crazy. The premise of this story, which again I'm not gonna spoil, but the premise of this story, what happens in this short story, it's so mind-fucking... it's absurd, but it's terrifying. It's terrifying. I think again, what he did was the horror element, and again there are a couple of horror elements in these. It's about making you think, what if this happened to you? What would you do? And it would just drive anybody absolutely crazy. And the way he displayed that, and the way it all turns out to be just so creepy, just bone chilling. It was just chilling what happens in these. So I really enjoyed this. I gave it full 4 stars, just because it's not 5 stars, just because it's really, there is no more than 84 pages, but I really enjoyed his writing, and I will check out more by the author if he ever puts out anything else. And it's a high praise for me to put this at number 1, because I don't like short stories, and it captured my attention, and it held it throughout, you know, the 84 pages that this was long for, and it made me think, I want more. Like, I want more. You actually unsettled me. And when I say I want more, I don't mean about this story. I think it was neatly done. I had a start, a middle, and an ending, and I think it worked for the length that it was perfectly. So it's not like I want more from this story, I just want more by the author. I like his mind, he's fucked up, and I love it. I want to know what he's thinking, you know, what is brewing next. What are the stories? Can you tell us? So we'll pick up more by the author. Thank you so much for watching. If you are new, I would love for you to subscribe and join the small community. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any of those books. What should I do with the Kingdom of Flesh and Stuff? I don't even remember the title. Have you read any S.A.BARNS? Would you suggest, you know, what do I read next by her? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to chat with you in the comments down below. Take care of yourself. I'll see you next time. Ciao!